In 1963, a young minister brought together a congregation of like-minded believers to establish a new church in Bothell, Washington. From the outset, they agreed to measure their success by a simple yet profound goal: to answer God's call to be a center of hope, refuge, and service in their community. That minister was Floyd Cronkite, a native of New England with an Ivy League education and an unusual path to ministry. He fell in love with the Northwest and with a Northwest girl. Through a series of God-ordained circumstances, together they set out to start a church in the then small town of Bothell, on the northern edge of King County in the Seattle metro area.
I'm Sherry Cronkite. My husband was the organizing minister of this church. Back in 1963 was our first service. At that time, I became the pianist and the organist, which had not been in my plan, but ended up doing it for the 30 years we were here.
Given his credentials and the available opportunities at established churches, it was out of the ordinary that they would plant a church in that location at that time.
Quite a hard way to go, really. But he kind of had ideas, dreams of kind of how he would like a church to be. Part of his education was in psychology, part of it, of course, in theology. And he liked to put the two together. And it was kind of a new idea. And they were kind of feeling around with the way to have a church. Do we want to just meet in homes? Like maybe the very first early churches did. Just kind of which direction did we want to go?
And in those days, starting a new church meant introducing yourself the old-fashioned way.
The minister, Reverend Cronkite, went door to door and was talking to people, inviting them to come to this opening session. And it was right next door to our house on West Hill.
Floyd Cronkite was a minister, a person who talked to me like an ordinary person, far from the minister I grew up with. And that impressed me, and I said, hey, I can talk to this guy. And in the services too, when we got going to church, I felt that he talked to me personally, like he was talking to me like I was the only one there. And I appreciated that so much.
And now, after half a century as a congregation, the people of Emmanuel still aspire to the same simple idea of what it means to be a successful church.
I think the thing that was profound that drew me to Emmanuel was that this was a church that seemed to be comfortable in its body. The thing that I was praying for as I made the transition from after 17 and a half years at UPC to another congregation, the thing that I was praying for was that I would be a part of a church that wasn't worried about what it wasn't. It seems like a lot of churches are anxious, and anxious specifically about why they're not like they used to be or how they should be more of what they need to become. And I didn't sense any of that anxiety on the part of Emmanuel. They were a church that seemed to have a strong sense of their own identity and had just rebuilt their building. I think that was a profound symbol for me of something that was going on here, because 35 families, something like that, decided to take on $1 million project to rebuild their building because their building was falling apart. And that's pretty unusual.
That decision to rebuild has proven to be just as significant as the decision to establish the church. As the project manager for the reconstruction, Warren Weber had a unique vantage point among church members.
Yeah, building the church was a fascinating process. When it first began, I was a big naysayer. I said there's no way in the world that a congregation this size could do a project this size. And Steve Myers, who was the head of the capital campaign, and I were sitting down one day And we said if we followed the teachings of Jesus and sold everything and gave it to the church, we could pay for the church ourselves. And it was then that I realized that building the addition on a church was not a matter of ability, it was a matter of desire. Did the church, the congregation of the church, really desire to build the church? Because there was no question as to whether we had the ability to do it. And now with the benefit of hindsight and looking back going, yeah, there was the hand of God was there.
But the measure of success for this church is not ultimately about the size of its buildings, its number of members, or the impact of its programs.
I have had the chance to read some of Floyd's early sermons, and I really believe that what I see in them is something that is congruent with what I feel like God is calling me to give witness to in this place, and it's the notion of faithful presence. As long as the community here believes that it's worthwhile for us to continue in existence, then we will. My vision doesn't sustain this place. My plans for growth don't sustain this place. They sustain it because they believe that it's worthwhile to be together in Christ's name, growing and learning and reaching out to others.
And so the legacy continues. 50 years ago, Floyd Cronkite offered very similar words to the congregation. Will we become a successful church? I hope that if we find success, that it will not be worldly success. I pray that we might find success similar to that achieved by the most successful church of all times. May it be said of us 50 years hence, when the day of Pentecost had come, they were all together in one place.